A retired train conductor in Tokyo walks away with more saved than most American doctors, and he never once earned six figures. His secret wasn't a stock tip, it wasn't a side hustle. It was a notebook that costs less than your morning coffee, and a set of habits so quiet you'd walk right past them if nobody pointed them out. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why some of the wealthiest, calmest people on earth have never heard of a budgeting app and never needed one. 18 months ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of stuff from a discount store down the street. Candles I didn't need. A throw pillow, replacing a throw pillow that was already fine. A kitchen gadget still in its box, sitting next to the last kitchen gadget I never opened. My card statement that month read $4,300 in charges. My savings account read $760. I was making close to $61,000 a year, and I'd been making solid money for the better part of 6 years. I had almost nothing to show for it. Around that same week, I stumbled across an old documentary about household finance in Japan, and one detail stopped me cold. Researchers following Japanese families found that certain money habits had been passed down for generations. Grandmothers teaching mothers, mothers teaching daughters. Ordinary families quietly building wealth over decades using principles so plain they felt almost embarrassing next to the complicated advice flooding your feed right now. Here's what really got me. Japan's entire relationship with money runs in the opposite direction of ours. In America, we celebrate spending. New car, new house, new closet, congratulations. Wealth is a performance. It's meant to be seen, posted, admired. In Japan, wealth stays hidden. Flaunting it is considered tasteless. Restraint isn't a punishment there, it's a value people actually take pride in. There's a word for it, shibui. It means understated, refined, quietly dignified, and it earns real respect. Live quietly in Japan, and people assume you're wise. Live quietly in America, and people assume something's wrong. Over the following year, I started testing these principles on myself, one at a time. I didn't get a raise. I didn't start a side hustle. I didn't cancel every subscription or swear off restaurants forever. I changed the operating system underneath my spending. 12 months later, I'd gone from $760 in savings to a little over $18,000. Same job, same paycheck, same apartment. Completely different machinery running underneath it. This video walks through 10 of those habits in the order that actually builds on itself, starting with the tool that makes everything else possible. Kakeibo, the notebook that makes your brain wake up. This one is the foundation, and it's over 120 years old. It was built in 1904 by a Japanese journalist named Hani Motoko at a time when women in Japan had almost no financial independence of their own. She designed it as a tool housewives could use to run their household finances with nothing but paper and a pen. The concept is almost embarrassingly simple. At the top of every month, you write down 4 numbers: what's coming in, what your fixed costs demand, what you want to set aside, what's left to spend. Then, every single day, you log what you spent and drop it into one of 4 buckets: needs, wants, culture, meaning books, classes, experiences, and unplanned costs. At the end of the month, you sit with the page and ask 3 questions. Did I save what I planned to? What went well? What needs to change? That's the entire system. It sounds too simple to matter, and that's precisely why it works. Here's what separates a notebook from every app on your phone. Writing by hand forces your brain to actually process a purchase. Tap a card, watch a number flash, and your brain barely clocks it. Sit down that night and write "Delivery app, $38" in your own handwriting, and something different happens. Your hand is telling your brain, I chose this. That wasn't a need, that was a want, plain and simple. People who stick with this method report cutting unnecessary spending by close to a third. I didn't hit a third in month 1, but I landed around 20%, which, on my income at the time, worked out to roughly $980 saved from a notebook that cost about $4. Here's why this matters right now, in the US, in 2026. Recent surveys put the number of Americans entering this year with zero budget of any kind above 45%. And among the people who do budget, most lean on apps that automate the whole process, which means they never build the awareness a handwritten ledger forces on you. The app does the thinking for you, your brain stays asleep. A notebook wakes it back up, and once it's awake, it's hard to put to sleep again. There's a second layer worth mentioning, because it's the reason this survives while budgeting apps come and go every couple of years. This system uses only 4 categories, not the 15 or 20 most apps throw at you. Needs, wants, culture, unplanned. The simplicity isn't an accident, it's the entire mechanism. The second you have to sort a purchase into one of 4 buckets, you're making a judgment call no algorithm can make for you. Is this dinner out a need or a want? Is this online course culture or a want wearing a disguise? Did you walk into the store for laundry detergent and walk out $60 heavier because something caught your eye? Those questions create what behavioral scientists call cognitive friction. Friction slows you down. Slowing down builds awareness. Awareness changes behavior. Modern financial products are obsessed with erasing friction. Tap to pay, one-click checkout, auto pay on everything. Frictionless sounds efficient. In practice, it's a major reason the average American misjudges their own subscription spending by well over $100 a month and underestimates impulse purchases by close to $280. A friend of mine, I'll call her Priya, tried this method for 6 weeks after years of downloading budgeting apps, setting them up carefully, and abandoning them within a month every single time. She said the difference was that apps made her feel like she was watching her own spending happen from the outside. The data existed somewhere, but she never actually processed it. Writing it by hand forced her to process every purchase twice, once when she spent it, once when she wrote it down. By the 3rd week, she caught herself pausing before buying things, sorting them mentally before her wallet even came out. Am I willing to write this down tonight? Became her filter. If the answer was no, she put it back. Her discretionary spending dropped by roughly $370 in that first month alone. Chokin. Pay yourself before the money ever touches your hands. Chokin literally translates to savings, but in Japanese financial culture, it represents something more specific. You save before you spend, not whatever's left over at the end of the month. The moment money lands in your account, a slice of it moves out immediately into savings or investing. Whatever remains is what you're allowed to spend. This flips the typical American pattern on its head. Most people earn, spend, and hope something's left to save. The Japanese model is earn, save, then spend what's left. That sounds like a small difference. It isn't. It's structural. When saving happens first, spending naturally shrinks to fit whatever remains. When saving happens last, there's rarely anything left, because expenses expand to swallow whatever's available. Parkinson's law applies to money the exact same way it applies to time. Work expands to fill the hours you give it. Spending expands to fill the income available. This habit breaks that cycle by removing the money before the spending decision even happens. In the US, the closest equivalent is automating a transfer to fire the day after your paycheck lands. Let me walk through this in real numbers because the math is what makes it undeniable. Say a guy named Devin takes home $4,900 a month after taxes. Under the typical approach, he spends throughout the month and saves whatever survives. In practice, almost nothing survives. His spending expands to fill his income like water filling a container. His savings rate sits around 3%, roughly $147 a month. And even that only happens because his 401k skims a small slice before he ever sees the deposit. Now picture Devin flipping the order. The morning after payday, an automatic transfer pulls $980, exactly 20%, into his retirement account, a Roth IRA, and a high-yield savings account. He never sees that money. His actual spending reality becomes $3,920. Within about 2 months, his brain adjusts completely, because it turns out the human brain adapts remarkably fast once spending simply isn't on the table. A year later, Devin has saved and invested $11,760. His old approach would have produced maybe $1,764. Stretch that out over 20 years at an 8% average return, and the Chokin version builds somewhere near $580,000. The old habit builds somewhere near $102,000. Same salary, same city, same life. The only variable is the order of operations. Save first, spend second, instead of spend first and hope. Credit card debt is nearly non-existent in Japan, partly because of this exact habit. Most Japanese credit cards default to auto-paying the full balance every month. Carrying a revolving balance is culturally unusual, almost eyebrow-raising. In the US, close to half of all cardholders carry a balance month to month, and total credit card debt in this country has pushed past the $1.2 trillion mark. The structural difference isn't income. Japan's median household income is actually lower than America's. The difference is sequence. Save first. That's the whole trick. Mottainai, the discomfort of letting something go to waste. This is a concept with no clean English translation, which is probably why most Americans have never run into it. Mottainai is a feeling, the regret and unease that surfaces when something useful gets thrown away, discarded, or undervalued. In Japanese culture, wasting a resource, whether it's food, fabric, money, or time, carries real emotional weight. When someone tosses food that could have been eaten or replaces something that could have been repaired, the reaction isn't indifference. It's a genuine wince. What a shame. What a waste. Compare that to America, where waste is baked directly into the economy. U.S. households are estimated to waste around 30% of the food they buy, somewhere near $2,000 a year tossed straight into the trash per household. Americans discard something like 80 pounds of textiles per person every year. We upgrade phones every couple of years, even though most are built to last twice that long. We toss furniture when we move instead of bringing it with us. When I started practicing this myself, I began by tracking food waste. For 1 week, I photographed everything I threw out of my fridge and pantry. The total genuinely shocked me. Half a bag of spinach, forgotten leftover rice, expired yogurt, a quarter of a rotisserie chicken nobody finished. I was throwing away close to $38 of food a week. That's nearly $2,000 a year, straight out of my refrigerator and into a landfill. So I started planning meals around what I already had, instead of what sounded appealing in the moment. I started freezing leftovers the same day, instead of promising myself I'd get to them tomorrow. I started buying smaller amounts more often, instead of stockpiling things that spoiled before I finished them. Within 3 months, my grocery bill dropped close to 28%. Not because I was eating less, but because I'd stopped throwing food away. This idea stretches far past food. It reshapes how you relate to everything you own. You repair instead of replace. You use something fully before chasing the next version. You find something a second purpose before you toss it. There's a Japanese tradition called kintsugi, where broken pottery gets mended with gold lacquer instead of thrown out. The repair becomes part of the object's beauty. The crack doesn't lower its value, it adds to it. Apply that same lens to your financial life. The thing that's slightly worn, slightly outdated, slightly imperfect, still works, still serves you, still holds value. This habit trains you to notice that value instead of chasing whatever's new. Kaizen, the 1% shift nobody notices happening. Most people know this word from manufacturing, made famous by Japanese car makers as a production philosophy. But in everyday Japanese life, Kaizen shows up everywhere, including money. The core idea is that you don't overhaul your life in one dramatic swing. You improve by roughly 1% over and over for a long stretch of time. Applied to money, it looks like this. This month, you trim dining out spending by 10%, not 50, just 10. Next month, you nudge your retirement contribution up by a single percent. The month after that, you cancel one subscription. Then you negotiate one bill. Then you swap one brand name product for the generic version. Each change feels too small to matter on its own. Each one requires almost no willpower. But 12 months of this produces a completely different financial life than the one you started with, and you'll barely notice the transition happening while it's underway. The reason this beats a dramatic financial overhaul comes down to how your brain is wired. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, activates when you attempt a big change. It reads large shifts as threats. That's exactly why most people who slash their entire budget in January have quietly abandoned it by March. The change was too big. The amygdala pushed back, and willpower eventually lost the fight. Small, steady change slips underneath that radar completely. 1% improvements don't trigger resistance. They just quietly stack up until one day you realize your savings rate climbed from 4% to 17% over the course of a year, and you honestly can't point to the exact moment it happened. Here's something worth sitting with for a second, and I'm genuinely curious about your answer. If you had to pick just 1% of your spending to trim this month, without touching anything else, what would it be? Drop it in the comments. I'll read through them, and it might tell us something interesting about where most of us are actually bleeding money without noticing. Hara Hachi Bu, leaving 20% of your life unfilled. This principle comes out of Confucian teaching and is practiced widely on the Japanese island of Okinawa, home to one of the highest concentrations of people who live past 100 anywhere on Earth. The idea is simple. You stop eating around 80% full instead of eating until you're stuffed. Most Americans eat until they're uncomfortable. We pile plates high, we supersize, we order appetizers, entrees, and dessert, and feel obligated to finish all of it because we already paid for it. The financial version of this habit becomes massive once you stretch it past food into a broader philosophy of enough. It means you don't fill your life to full capacity. You leave room in your stomach, room in your closet, room in your budget, room in your schedule. That leftover 20% isn't deprivation, it's margin. And margin is where real wealth quietly lives. In practical terms, applying this to spending means leaving about a fifth of your income completely untouched. If you take home $4,300 a month, you live as if you make $3,440. That $860 goes straight into savings and investing automatically. You never touch it because it never enters your spending reality in the first place. Recent government data put the U.S. personal savings rate hovering around 4%. 4%. Japan's cultural default through habits like this one aims for closer to 20. That gap between 4 and 20 is the difference between an anxious retirement and a comfortable one. On a $60,000 salary, it's the gap between saving $2,400 a year and saving $12,000. Stretch that out over 30 years at an 8% return, and that gap turns into something like $290,000 versus $1.45 million. There's a deeper layer underneath the math. In Okinawa, this isn't taught as a diet trick or a money hack. It's taught as a form of respect. Respect for food, because you don't waste it through overconsumption. Respect for your body, because you don't burden it needlessly. Respect for tomorrow, because you leave something available for later instead of consuming it all today. That word, respect, is exactly what's missing from a lot of American financial culture. We don't tend to respect our future selves. We trade tomorrow's stability for today's comfort with alarming consistency. The average American carries several $1,000s in credit card debt at an interest rate north of 22%. That debt is borrowed comfort, the financial equivalent of eating past full and wondering later why you feel sick. A woman I'll call Renata, who works in dental office administration outside Denver, started applying this to her finances about a year and a half ago. She calculated 80% of her take-home pay, roughly $3,680 out of $4,600, and committed to living inside that boundary. The remaining $920 went into a high-yield savings account and a Roth IRA. In 18 months, Renata saved and invested just over $15,000. She told me the hardest part wasn't the cutting. It was rewiring her brain to see 80% as abundant instead of restrictive. Once that flipped, everything else fell into place on its own. Wabi-sabi, finding beauty in the thing that's already yours. This is one of the deepest Japanese aesthetic ideas, and it sits directly opposite the consumer culture driving most American spending. Wabi-sabi is an appreciation for things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. A cracked bowl that still holds soup. A scratched wooden table that carries the story of 100 family dinners. A sweater with a small mend that reminds you how long you've loved it. In America, imperfection usually gets treated as a reason to replace something. Scratch on your phone screen? New phone. Scuff on your shoes? New shoes. Slightly flattened couch cushion. Time to start browsing for a replacement. The consumer economy runs on your dissatisfaction with things that still work perfectly well. Wabi-sabi invites you to find satisfaction in them instead. The financial impact adds up fast once you run the numbers over time. Americans spend somewhere around $9,000 a year on the categories most driven by aesthetic dissatisfaction: clothing, home furnishings, electronics. If this mindset shift trimmed that spending by even a quarter, just by helping you keep things longer, repair instead of replace, and appreciate what you already own, that's over $2,200 redirected every single year. At 8% over 25 years, that's roughly $175,000 built entirely from a philosophy of appreciating what's already in your house. Ikigai, asking what the money is actually for. Ikigai roughly translates to reason for being. In the West, it's been repackaged into a career-finding framework, the overlap of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what someone will pay you for. In Japan, it isn't really about optimizing a career. It's about having a purpose that gives your daily life structure and meaning. That purpose might be gardening, cooking for your family, teaching, volunteering, staying healthy well into old age. Applying this to money changes your financial life in a way no spreadsheet ever could, because it answers a question budgets, apps, and investment calculators never ask. What is this money actually for? Most people save without any real purpose behind it, or spend without any real intention. They save because someone told them to, or spend because something looked appealing in the moment. There's no guiding philosophy underneath the behavior. This habit gives you that philosophy. Once you know what your money is for, once you've actually named the life you're building, every spending decision becomes a small vote for or against that life. A friend I'll call Malik defined his reason for being as staying fully present for his daughter's childhood without financial stress hanging over every day. Once he had that clarity, every unnecessary purchase turned into an obstacle standing between him and the thing he actually cared about. He didn't need more willpower to stop impulse buying. He needed purpose. Once he found it, those purchases didn't just feel expensive anymore. They felt beside the point entirely. Shinrin Yoku, building a life you don't have to pay for. In Japan, Shinrin Yoku means forest bathing, spending quiet, unhurried time in nature as a form of stress relief and mental reset. It costs nothing. The bigger idea behind it is what I think of as free living, deliberately building your leisure, your social life, and your recreation around things that don't require spending money. In the US, leisure and spending have basically become the same word. Fun costs money. Relaxing costs money. Socializing costs money. A night out, a weekend trip, a movie, a shopping trip disguised as entertainment. The average American household spends somewhere around $2,800 a year on entertainment alone. Japanese culture offers a completely different model. Walking, cooking together, reading, gardening, visiting a park or a quiet temple, tea made at home. The richest moments of daily life happen without a transaction attached to them. When I started building my weekends around free activities, parks, cooking with friends at home, library visits, long walks with no destination, my entertainment spending dropped by more than half in about 3 months. I didn't miss anything. My weekends actually got better because I stopped equating fun with buying things and started equating it with just being there. Osoji, the annual reset that finds the money you forgot about. In Japan, osoji happens at the end of every year. Families deep clean the entire home, let go of what no longer serves them, and step into the new year with a clear head and a clear space. It isn't spring cleaning, it's far more intentional than that. It's a ritual built entirely around releasing. Applied to money, this becomes an annual financial audit. Once a year, ideally in December or January, you sit down and go through your entire financial life. Every subscription, every recurring charge, every insurance policy, every investment allocation, every debt balance, every auto pay. You review it all, cancel what isn't serving you, renegotiate what can be lowered, and realign everything with where you actually want to end up. Most people build their financial systems once and never look at them again. Subscriptions quietly pile up, premiums creep higher, allocations drift away from their targets, and an annual reset catches all of it at once. In my first one, I found close to $290 a month in charges I had completely forgotten about or no longer needed. That's nearly $3,500 a year quietly leaking out of my account while I wasn't paying attention to anything. Hansei, the reflection that ties everything together. This is the final habit, and it's the one holding all the others in place. Hansei is a Japanese practice of sincere, unflinching self-reflection. It isn't self-criticism, and it isn't guilt. It's an honest look at what you did, what worked, what didn't, and what you'll try differently next time. In Japanese schools, kids practice this from a young age. It's woven into the culture. You don't reflect because you failed. You reflect because reflection is how you grow. Applied to money, this is the monthly review that closes the loop on everything else in this video. You sit down with your notebook, look at what you spent, look at what you saved, and ask 3 questions without any judgment attached. Did I meet my savings goal? What purchases actually brought me real value? What would I change next time? This 10-minute monthly habit of honest financial reflection is arguably the most important one on this entire list because it's the mechanism that improves every other habit on it. The waste gets easier to notice. The habit of leaving margin gets easier to see because you can spot exactly where you overfilled. The 1% shifts get direction because you can spot the next small improvement waiting for you. Without this final habit, the other 9 stay frozen in place. With it, they compound. And that word, compound, is exactly where I want to leave you. Every single habit in this video runs on the same principle as compound interest. Small, consistent inputs, repeated over time, producing results wildly out of proportion to the effort involved. A $4 notebook and 10 minutes a day doesn't sound like a wealth strategy. Neither does leaving 20% of your plate empty or finding beauty in a scratched-up table. But these tiny behaviors, stacked on each other, practiced day after day, month after month, year after year, produce something no income level can produce on its own. They produce a relationship with money that's grounded, intentional, and built to actually last. The wealthiest people I've come across in my research, and I don't mean the flashiest earners or the loudest ones, I mean the people carrying the deepest financial security and the least anxiety, all share one trait. They understand how money actually works at a fundamental level. They understand compound growth. They understand the difference between an asset and a liability. They understand that $1 saved is worth more than $1 earned because it arrives without tax, without effort, and without burnout attached to it. The man sitting at that kitchen table 18 months ago, surrounded by things he didn't need, bought with money he didn't really have, checking a credit card balance that made his stomach turn every time he opened the app. He didn't need a bigger paycheck. He needed a different philosophy. The habits came after the understanding. The results came after the habits. Japan figured this out a long time ago. Some of these principles are over a century old. They survived wars, economic collapse, and cultural upheaval because they actually work. And they work because they're built on something deeper than a tactic. Respect for money as a resource. Respect for yourself as the one taking care of it. You don't need a bigger paycheck to start building wealth. You might already earn enough. You just need a notebook, a pen, and the willingness to actually pay attention to where your money is going. That's where it starts. That's where it's always started. If any of these 10 habits hit home, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share this with the one person in your life who needs to hear it today.